Hi, Clark. Welcome. Okay. All right. We are going to go ahead and get started. It is Tuesday, October 18th, 2022, and we are going to go ahead and start our study session. We'll begin by introducing who is here. Terry, go ahead.
Terry Bodden.
Connie Burgess.
Clark Nelson.
Chris Wynn.
And I'm Nicole McDermott. We are going to Julie Jackson. I'm not sure. She should be here, so she might sneak in. Dr. Nye, I know, is just taking a call. He will come in just a moment. And we'd like to excuse Karen Winder. She had a family emergency that came up last minute. So she would love to be here, but family things come first. So, all right, we have a consent agenda. You guys have had this to look over. So if there's any questions, comments, I'll entertain a motion. See, that came up last minute. So she would love to be here, but
I moved that.
family things come first. So, all right, we have
I'll second.
a consent agenda. You guys have had this to look over. So a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, consent agenda passes. And with that, we will move on to our main objective, our study session here. Our technology assessment report and plan of action. This has been coming for a while, and we are so looking forward to this. And hope that we can get a lot out of this. So Rick, I don't know if you want to introduce, and we'll go from there.
Vice President, board members, superintendent, cabinet, we engaged last spring with the outside consultant, Plant Moran, who did a comprehensive technology assessment here in Grand. And we wanted to get a sense, as technology is becoming more and more important every year, a sense of where we stood, and engaged with them, RFP'd for that, and selected Plant Moran to come take a look at us. They started in the spring and worked through the summer to put this together. Tonight, we have both Marv and Judy here, and I think they have a slide introducing themselves, and they were involved here in the spring and throughout the summer themselves, putting this assessment together. They plan to go through that, answer questions. We talked a little bit about just answering questions as you have them and working through those. After they are completed, I will then go into our plan of action, somewhat of a response to the assessment and recommendations that they make. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We appreciate being here. A little bit about IT assessments. So IT assessments are really a best practice. We're seeing them across multiple industries. We focus on the education side of things, and it's very healthy to just bring in an outside party to take a look at your technology function on a periodic basis. And so when we do our IT assessments, we look at it from 3 different perspectives. We look at the people, the process, and the technology itself. So people, we're looking at human capital, your resources, what's your support structure. We also look at how are you using outside entities. So that's what we would call strategic sourcing. Then we also spend time talking to your stakeholders. So end users, we talk to students, we talk to principals, we talk to the IS staff, ed tech staff, we talk to a broad cross-section of folks within the district. Process, what's your strategy? How are you delivering services? How are you making decisions about technology? So what's your governance structure? What are you doing from a cybersecurity and overall risk perspective? And then the technology itself. We focused in on the infrastructure, end user enablement, so the end user technologies, the classroom technologies, the software that you've got in place, and then business intelligence and data. So again, 3 different perspectives. We had a series of inputs that we received. So we had issued an end user survey. We got over 1,800 responses. We solicited feedback from the executive leadership team. We received a significant amount of information from both IS and Ed Tech. We would be remiss if we did not recognize all of the efforts that the IS group and the Ed Tech group went through to help us with this assessment. So thank you. It was a heavy lift for them in terms of getting us a lot of the data. And then we also interviewed them, so then they had to spend time talking to us. So we met with all of the IS and representative ed tech staff, and then we interviewed over 70 stakeholders across the district. What does that mean? So we took all of that information, analyzed it, we had a team that worked on it, came up with some areas for recognition, areas for potential improvement, and then we'll get into our maturity assessment and a deeper dive on some of the recommendations. So areas of recognition. So the end user feedback, both through surveys as well as through the end user interviews, very, very positive, very high satisfaction with both IS as well as ed tech. And perhaps I should take a step back. So within the school district, you have two different groups that support technology. You have your information services or information systems group, that's IS, and then you've got your ed tech group. And those, the ed tech group provides the first line of support, and IS is managing the infrastructure. They're providing level 2 and level 3 support, and they're supporting the applications within the district that are the enterprise-wide applications. So there's a lot of synergies in terms of those two groups, but not sure if you know, you've got the two groups that are supporting technology. Satisfaction very high with both groups. We also received very positive feedback both in the surveys as well as discussions on the availability and the integrity of student performance data and the associated support that goes along with that. You've made significant recent investments in your technology environment, whether it was network upgrades or the Chromebooks that you bought during the pandemic, but sizable investments in technology. And then related to that, the district's one-to-one program is very well received by both students and teachers and principals, at least those that we talked to, and our survey results. And we would say that the district compares very favorably to other large districts on the percent of overall revenue allocated to technology. That's over the last couple of years, so realize that's probably skewed because of the ESSER funds. But if we look at just the last couple of years, very favorable.
When you say that, is that just districts in our state or districts nationwide?
Nationally. Yeah. Potential improvement areas, so I explained the organizational structure with having two groups support technology. That is a complex structure, and there are some implications in terms of end users don't always know who to call for support. Professional development, this is not an atypical observation across districts. Professional development is a challenge for end users as well as your technology support group. It's hard to make the time. It's hard to get the meaningful classes and the meaningful training in there. While you made a significant number of technology investments, some of that using ESSER funds or one-time funding, there is a need to come up with a sustainability plan for some of those technology investments. You have what we would call a refresh plan, so a plan to refresh some of the technology. You don't have a refresh plan or funding identified to replace all of the technology that's been purchased recently. You also have over 800 applications within the district, some duplication of applications, so you have 2 email platforms, you have 2 learning management systems, you have 2 options for sharing and storing files. So the sheer number of applications within the district creates a very, very complex environment to support. So that's an opportunity for potential improvement there. And then because you have 2 separate groups supporting technology, the delineation of duties could be better defined between those 2 groups. Mark?
All right. Questions on any of that? We'll just keep rolling. All right. Want to also point out that this was a point-in-time assessment, right? So we completed our work in May, June, but we also then had some ongoing discussion with Rick and the team. So things can change, right? It moves fast, so we just want to make sure you know we were here doing interviews and meeting with people in that time period, then we had, report drafted and spent some time with folks over the summer, just bringing you up to. And now we're at October 18th. And we have a maturity assessment where this is something that we do to look at. We try to compare you against best practices and benchmarks that are out there for school districts. And also, because we do this with a lot of school districts, we have all of those school districts to compare you to as well, right? And so we do something called this maturity assessment. And what you see here is, since we're in a school environment, it's like a grading system, and it goes from ad hoc all the way to advanced. It goes ad hoc, we say, somewhat informal, reactive, you have some things in place. Stable is somewhat of a sweet spot because it means you have some repeatable processes in place, and in some cases you're using best practices. Proactive means you're somewhat best in class, and advanced means you're off the charts. Now, well, Terry, let's talk about that. Advanced, we don't normally recommend for a school district to be at an advanced level because of the investment and resources required. I'll give you an example where we do. When we're doing an assessment for a hospital, having their network up and running is literally life and death, and so we do think they should be advanced. A bank who is storing a lot of confidential information, we think they should be advanced maybe from a security standpoint, but we don't typically use that in a school setting just because the amount of investment isn't worth the reward. Proactive, and you'll see we don't necessarily even do a lot of them at proactive. That's why I said stable, you'll see, is actually kind of a sweet spot, and maybe a few that would be proactive. Again, you have limited resources, and there's only so much you can do to get to those further levels. So, oh, look at that. I have someone advancing for me. I like this. So,
I'm being proactive.
you're, yeah, we'll just put it proactive, not advanced, I'd say. So, what we have on this slide is that time dial is where you're at right now. The bullseye is where we suggest you would go. And then that final column, the trend line is if you left things the way they are and didn't listen to anything we said, this is where you'd be trending. So if Judy, she covered what was included. For example, you see on the left there, it says people, process, technology. And so now, like the first one, right, it says human capital. How you're structured, the two groups that you have in place. There's some recommendations that we have about improving that structure. And so we said, right now, you're reactive in that particular area. Again, not a bad thing, and what we say is we'd like you to move one level. With the recommendations we've made, we can move you to, we feel, a stable environment, which would be great. And if you look down the list, many of them are in that reactive. And why is that? Maybe things aren't documented as well as they could be documented, or formalized or repeatable. And that happens in technology where things change at a rapid pace, and guess what? Putting process and procedure in place is not the most exciting thing to do, so a lot of times that gets left to the end. We talk about strategic sourcing being ad hoc, and that's again, do you have some type of mechanism in place to evaluate, well, when should we do this in-house and when should we maybe use an outside vendor? And if we do use an outside vendor, how do we evaluate those outside vendors on a regular basis to make sure they're doing what they should be doing. So those are some of the things that we see from a structure standpoint that you'd want to put in place for what we call strategic sourcing. And that's one, if you look down the list, there are only a couple that we say you should try and jump 2 places, right? From, for example, on strategic sourcing, you're at ad hoc, we want to get you to stable. On stakeholders, now this is a unique one because the stakeholders were very happy with the support that's being provided. What the area that took it down a notch was there's some need for professional development, both for stakeholders as well as, and we use that for your IS and educational technology staff as well in terms of professional development, and a little bit in communications where we could communicate more proactively with folks. And so that's one you saw we brought up too. Operations management, all that back end stuff of how do people call for support and how do we deliver that support. We'd like to see that one up 2 notches as well. And that's one of 3 that we actually have as proactive. Stakeholders, we'd like to see you at proactive. Operations management, we'd like to see you there. And that infrastructure, we'd like, actually that's a mistake. Infrastructure, we were just seeing if you were paying attention. You see we have 2 bullseyes on that one. It's actually, that one is under stable. Again, Terry, we thought you were so special, we want to give you 2 bullseyes, not just 1. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, no, we don't give that to any other district, just here we did that. And then you saw the trend lines, right, of some that are trending downward. Actually, infrastructure with all the investments you've been making and upgrading things, you're actually trending upward with the things that you're doing there. A few are actually stable with what you're doing, and then others, you know, we've got a number of recommendations. We don't think you hired us to do an IT assessment to tell you everything was hunky-dory, and don't bother doing it. You know, just leave it the way it is, and let's just see how it works out. All right. So, as I said, we had a lot of recommendations. We boiled them down really to an action plan. Now, the action plan kind of looks at the top recommendations, if you will. And we tried to give you some themes of, a lot of times when you do this, some things kind of percolate up of, well, what do we really need to do at Granite to move technology forward? And we said the first thing, there's just some blocking and tackling things, the documentation and putting some things in place, some process, procedure, technology committees, things like that, that we said let's just stabilize. Not that things are unstable, but we called it stabilize. And then we said, once you've done that, you can really look to do some more advanced things and kind of optimize the environment. And then finally, once you've done that, you kind of want to stay there, so let's sustain it. And that's really the final category that we came up with. And so we're highlighting some of the recommendations that we made in each of these areas. I don't know that I'll go through every single one of them, but I'll pick out a few that I think, because some of them we also talked about as we were going through it. The restructuring of the technology support function. The biggest thing we're talking about there is bringing IS and educational technology under one report, and that seat would be at cabinet. So you'd have technology directly represented at cabinet, and you'd have those 2 groups reporting to the same person, if you will. That we think is a big area for you. You see formalizing IT governance. We already kind of talked about outsourcing. The governance, how you make decisions. So there's some committees that we recommend. You know, there can be an overall steering committee and a committee that's focused on the administrative side and a committee that's focused on the educational technology side. and working together with doing strategic planning, doing some measuring of how effective technology is. So we see that governance is a big thing. Some of the other things your team is already working on, your backup strategy, making sure that you're backing up everything, local as well as on servers. You have a great strategy in place for the server environment. We want to just see that expanded. You're already working on network and internet performance problems. There's probably been activity since we've been here where you were looking at the connections between the buildings, so we call that the wide area network, and then inside the buildings, the wireless network that many of the staff, students, teachers are using. You're evaluating that, so we want to make sure you continue to do that, as well as your connection to the internet to make sure that's robust enough. And you're already, the last one, you're already doing some server and storage upgrades, again, through, Judy had mentioned the influx of funds and investments that you're making. A lot of it was on infrastructure, which would be that server and storage, if you will.
Regarding the new cabinet position that you mentioned, is that an incremental position that you're recommending, or just incremental responsibilities to a currently occupied position?
I think Rick's probably going to talk about how you're going about implementing, but we think it should be a permanent position and function. If that, you were saying interim, or were you saying?
No, I was saying incremental. Is that an incremental position, a new position that's added to the cabinet, or incremental responsibilities added to already existing cabinet positions?
I think the way it's being implemented, it's incremental to an existing. And we concur with the way it's being recommended to move forward. Yep. Then under optimize, we think it'd be great as the district has, and since we've been here, I know you were working on a district-wide strategic plan. We said you can't have then a technology strategic plan until you have that in place, but we think those two go hand in hand. So you should have a strategic technology plan that helps and supports the district-wide strategic plan. There are a few things that Judy had mentioned about help, the way support is provided. There are many options. You can email, you can call someone, someone's in the building, you can flag them down, you can go to the help desk. We want to consolidate that and make sure everything eventually funnels through that help desk. Talked about multiple learning management systems and email systems. We'd like to see you get to one. We have, you hired consultants, so we need to use some fancy consulting language. So we say rationalize the application software. What that means is, and Judy mentioned, you have over 800 software applications. As you might imagine, there's probably some duplicates in terms of functionality of software packages. Rationalizing looks at each of those applications and tries to figure out, should we retire that? Should we replace it? Should we integrate it with another package? How can we take this many applications and get it down to really the core ones? Now, we're not saying you would get down to a handful, but 800 is a lot to manage. So let's figure out which ones are really meaningful. It might be painful for some that have gotten used to certain applications that they have. You guys have been great in allowing buildings to make decisions on software products that they're purchasing. It might be time to reel that back in and have some standards in place across the district to make it easier on your IS and educational technology staffs as well. And then with that, how your data, again, how you make decisions about data and try to have one source of data. Data governance is a whole area as well. You've been doing some things, putting a plan in place. we want to see an overarching program in place that plan feeds into. And then the final area on the action plan is sustain. How do we sustain? And some things we already talked about, an IT vendor management program where maybe you would evaluate vendors on an annual basis that you have long-term contracts in place with. Maybe you have a scorecard that you keep to see how they're doing. Maybe you bid out those services every 3 to 5 years. Just put some structure around that. We have some things Judy already mentioned about funding, sustainable funding, and kind of the replacement strategy. Those two go hand in hand to make sure that when you purchase something, as a board, if it comes to the board and you're approving it, one of the questions might be, okay, that's the initial cost. When will we be replacing this? What are the operational costs associated with this? And how are we funding that? So that right away, you're building that sustainability and replacement strategy into everything that you do. And part of that also is looking at an asset life cycle, the useful life of equipment, and trying to make sure you're not, the plan is not, let's just use it till it breaks. Let's actually have a proactive plan in place that we replace on a consistent basis. Some things have longer useful lives than other technology. And then to help with that, you'd have a comprehensive end user asset inventory that's down to, serial number, the software versions that are on there, just all the detail, and you can see it kind of rolls up into, all right, that helps us in a life cycle, that asset, how we're using it over time, how we're going to replace it, how we're going to sustain it. That's all part of it. And that may be a little longer than we thought. I can barely introduce myself in 5 minutes, so I'm doing pretty well to only be at this time period. This was my short version, by the way.
That was great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Is there any questions that you guys have for them before Rick takes over?
And we can stick around for Rick as well.
Switch?
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks. You're welcome. Thank you.
Board, two-part presentation. And thank you, Marv and Judy, and thanks for sticking around in case a question does come up. You can help me navigate. As Marvin mentioned, we've had these results for a few months, and so we've already started tackling many of these recommendations, breaking them down, prioritizing them, and tackling them. So let me speak to what we've currently done, does the plan of action portion. Objectives of this presentation are to acknowledge celebrations that we have, acknowledge the identified areas of improvement that have been given to us or recommendations, and then provide this plan of action or areas for improvement. We need chairs. We need chairs. So Marvin and Judy did cover this, but I just wanted to reiterate that one thing that we felt really positive about from the result was our end users, that being classroom teachers and individuals out at the schools. Overall, their feedback was that on the service that we're providing was very positive. So we were quite excited about that.
Rick, by service, that means like the support.
Support, yeah.
Not the service like the programs they're using, but the support that they get from that.
That's great clarification.
Just making sure.
Yes, so positive feedback on, hey, I'm having an issue with my mouse, and how quickly that is addressed and the support that they receive there. It could be software issues too. I'm struggling to figure out this where to go in Canvas here and the support that's given.
Did we have, as part of that, did we have any feedback on how they're feeling about as far as the infrastructure that we have in place and how that is working or not working?
Connectivity.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what's somewhat prompted, that was a piece of what prompted this overall assessment. I don't want to speak for Judy and Mob. I'll look at them to keep me honest here, but I think that connectivity was a piece of how they were feeling about technology in Granite. Fairly true, connectivity?
Yes.
Yeah.
And also about the amount of technology and level of resources that were available. A lot of staff commented on how fortunate they were to be in a district like Granite that made all these resources available.
Just in case. Yeah. Just in case. Just for industry. That continue, pointing that out, Nicole, I think is part because we live or die a little bit by connectivity these days. Just the reliance and the availability of Chromebooks, teachers' lesson planning around that structure, that connectivity ends up being hero or zero, depending on where that's at. And we acknowledge that and certainly understand that. I stole the graphic from Plant Moran. People, process, technology. The way I organized the plan of action was around their people piece, process piece, technology piece, the recommendations that they gave, and then the types of things that we're currently doing or planning to do. On the people piece, that restructure the technology support function, and Clark had a question to that. Currently, both information systems and educational technology are in the division that I supervise. When Linda Mariotti passed away, educational technology, and when we reorganized who supervised some different things, educational technology was nested in curriculum and instruction. A piece to try and make sure that we have good alignment and we have good communication is moving educational technology from being nested in curriculum and instruction and having Chris, who's here, report directly to me. So both Dale and Chris, Dale's here as well, report to me, the assistant superintendent over those two departments.
So,
And-
sorry, Rick.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, so that, it's not necessarily a change as far as, it's always been under you, but it's just been further buried under curriculum, so instead of reporting, they'll
Yep.
just report directly to you.
Both had reported to Linda Mariotti. When we reorganized, we moved educational technology nested under curriculum instruction, which reports to me as well, but it was one step removed. So following their recommendations, pulling educational technology out from under, if you will, curriculum and reporting directly to me.
Thank you.
The second piece here is I personally need to take some ownership of that recommendation and making sure that we improve synergies, communications, et cetera, with both departments.
Hey, Rick, can you give me an idea of how that makes things different? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think when we had educational technology in curriculum instruction, there is a good rationale for educational technology to be working really closely with curriculum and instruction. And we made those arguments when we made the decision to make that happen. I think you do lose when educational technology is a direct report and has a seat at my cabinet's table, if you will. I think that improves communication. I think it improves voice. I think it improves collaboration. I won't read through each of these, but these are where I took the recommendations made by Plant Moran and put them under processes. And they're literally the same that you just seen, is the way I organized each of these. So taking a look at the processes that they name, and actually in processes, I have 2 slides worth. They have quite a few recommendations under that category of processes. Our solution at this point, a couple of months after receiving the recommendations, is to form a district technology steering committee. And that was part of their recommendations. They hadn't included it in the slide deck, but it was one of the recommendations they had for us. And this is where we see, as a collaborative group, Dale and Chris both being part of that district technology steering committee. We have Jared Gardner, who's in purchasing on that committee. We also have a representative from Dawn's division as well on that committee. And we were having some discussions about looking to add some principal level people to that committee as well as we get our feet under us and get moving. We see that committee being able to address many of the recommendations given, whether it's governance processes, that technology strategic plan. This committee can start mapping that out and soliciting feedback and doing the lifting of a technology strategic plan. Develop and sustain a technology funding model. This is a real challenge for us, and in previous years' presentations, Nicole's nodding and smiling. Yeah. We have some really good sustainable systems for certain pieces of our technology. Others we have done it somewhat ad hoc in terms of purchasing needed items, but not having that refreshment budget set aside. I'll give you an example. A challenge for us has been interactive whiteboards. For 10 plus years, interactive whiteboards has not had a refreshment or sustainable budgeted model. We've lived off of one-time monies to keep that going, and certainly this ESSER infusement, the infusement of ESSER monies has allowed us to refresh a lot of our technology that is not set up on refreshed cycles. This is a challenge for us that we'll need to start tackling, and a technology steering committee to do that. The complex software applications and just the increased complexity that creates for us, this is a challenge that I know the board often wrestles with as well. This is a little bit of a local control out at school sites versus an organizational control here at the district office dilemma, and trying to find that balance between programs and software that the school really wants to use versus organizationally what we're able to support in an efficient manner.
Okay, so I just certainly don't understand technology like many younger ones do. So part of the 800 applications that we have come from the schools as well as what the district can do.
Correct.
So that seems to me like an overwhelming responsibility to go through those things. How kind of do you have a general or not specific necessarily idea as to how that's going to happen?
Well, I think what this committee needs to land on and even bring to the superintendent or the board perhaps is, where do we want to land on the degree to which we allow very local, even down to the classroom level choice on software versus organizationally? What are we going to say? No, this is the Goldilocks level of complexity that we can truly manage. That's the bigger question that we're going to have to grapple with as a committee. And we've allowed, and the recommendation has been, you haven't been the just right, you've been too much, which is creating problems for you in terms of support.
So I have a question. Do we have too much because we've allowed a lot of decisions at the local, like classroom level? Okay.
Yeah, and we know why we do that, right? We want to be all things to all people and support everyone. So again, I'm not here professing it's just a piece that we're going to have to grapple with and decide for us to be efficient with the resources we have. What's the level of choice and autonomy that we can truly manage as an organization?
So I know it was mentioned, could it be that there are duplicates or close duplicates that can be shared and stuff like that?
There very well could be, and Marv had mentioned that, or Judy had mentioned that, and that's a piece for us to then not only grapple with that bigger question, that philosophical question, but also drill down to what do we have exactly and where are we duplicating?
But that has not been answered as of yet, correct?
Correct.
That's just, we know there's 800 out there. We have no idea how many are duplicates or not, right?
We know what they are, but we haven't gone through the exercise of saying, where's our duplicates? A nuance to that, though, is, and this again takes you back to that philosophical piece. Let me use, well, I won't use this example. A teacher might have a piece of software that they like to use that really is also done by this piece of software. They both do the same thing. They're just different brands, and they prefer this brand over this brand. That's where it starts. Either these are duplicates, but local control, we've allowed for them to use the brand they like.
Rick, because of that, philosophy we've had of local control and that our teachers are so invested in the applications that they have, I just wonder, I'm sure you had a conversation about including teachers and or parents on this steering committee. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, we haven't gotten to that level yet. Literally, we actually meet tomorrow, and we're only to the point of taking a look at all of the recommendations as a district office group and unwrapping those and finding the larger themes and prioritizing. We have, as a committee, recognized there's going to need to be some other stakeholders that have voice and are involved as well, and we'll bring them on once we start getting our feet under us, if we will.
I want to add to maybe add to the discussion the importance of listening to what students have to say about it.
Yep. Under those same processes, so we went through the list of processes that they'd given, and we talked district technology steering committee's responsibilities. I've lumped those into this slide. A second half of that is information systems. Information systems is prioritizing data backup, which is locally hosted and in the cloud, and looking for solutions to meet the needs of increasing district demand. So this is just storage of data. The more we're on computers, the more we're using these platforms, the more data has to be stored, and information systems is prioritizing a focus on how to keep up with that demand. Systems will continue to resolve internet and network issues. This is what we talked about earlier. Nicole and I tongue-in-cheek said, we're hero or zero depending on how that's going. Information systems is completing a server and storage migration activities as well. So again, back to that enormous amount of data and the need to have storage for it. On the technology side, these are again the recommendations that were shown by Plant Moran. The action plans that are associated, that are currently underway, is information systems is working on an RFP for a new work order system. I don't think this was in the slides, Marv didn't say it, but our existing work order system has been identified as something that needs to be upgraded and improved on. So information systems is starting to tackle that. Information systems is working on developing service level agreements. Service level agreements, and hopefully I don't butcher it, Dale, essentially a service level agreement is basically a benchmark that information systems wants to meet. It's their promise to users. It's the service level they are agreeing to meet users' needs. I'm looking over to I'm getting nods that I got that good enough. Information systems is exploring mobile device management solutions as well, and transparently, I use the word exploring. We're just starting to look into this recommendation and saying, okay, what does that mean? Again, information systems is exploring outside contracting of network security monitoring, and have created a technology security working group focused on addressing security issues. Plant Moran didn't go too much in depth of it, but they did a comprehensive security breach test on all of how secure our networks were, and PII, et cetera, and gave us some recommendations there, and so we're taking action on that.
Rick, earlier you talked about the data storage, which I feel like is connected to this
Related,
security
yeah.
issue. And so my question is, are we currently like renting storage from someone?
Correct. In
And
the
then-
cloud storage.
Yeah, so,
We have, I'll look at Dale to correct me if I'm wrong, we have a hybrid model where we do have our own hardware storage side and we also have cloud side. Out in industry, a cloud side is what most everyone is moving to or uses. And I'm, again, looking at Plant Moran to keep me honest, yeah.
yeah, I think that would be an interesting thing I just didn't notice, maybe when you talked about data earlier, you were talking about looking at that, but I think that's one of the things that we could really consider.
Yeah, that's a good distinction, is where is storage migrating to now? And it's mostly moving to the cloud as a solution. And we pay for that storage space, if you will. Dale, did you have a comment? You've got to use the mic, though.
Sorry. All of our cloud storage, all of our user files are cloud storage today. So anything that between Google and Microsoft, whatever you keep, your local personal stuff is all cloud storage. Applications and data storage for what we do, we're probably 90% on-premise here and 10% in the cloud. We use Microsoft Azure as our cloud storage source today.
So our local storage is application storage, but the data that like we're worried about security is on the cloud, mostly.
The data we're probably more worried about student information and financial information is local.
Oh,
Any personal stuff that you may do in Google or Microsoft, any of those applications, like Rit's presentation, he's storing to for his presentation is cloud storage.
right. And also, while I've got you, Dale, so since we have much of our applications locally, installed on computers and things, do we have a tendency to want to move to a subscription base with those kinds of, or tell me where we're at on that?
We actually are, as part of the RFP, so we chose Focus as a new student information system to replace our Discovery, our current grade book and student management system. The Focus system is cloud storage. All of that information, when we move to that, will be hosted in the cloud. And so that vendor is then responsible for securing the information, maintaining the information, and that's just part of the contracted services, if you will, that they will provide for us to make sure all that student information is secured and backed up.
So we won't be storing that information any longer as we switch over to the new SIS?
The only times we would is if we wanted to bring anything from local creation reports and things, but the majority of that will be us.
Okay. Is that, and I'm assuming that cloud storage tends to be safer than local, and that's why we're preferring cloud storage on that?
I mean, safer,
more
but
secure.
it's industry trend. I mean, that's where things are. We rely on the vendors again. Contractually, we trust these vendors to have practices in place to secure our stored data.
Okay.
Also, I want to make sure I understand what we're talking about. When we talk about applications versus software, can you tell me the difference in your mind?
Somewhat synonymous.
Okay. Because I'm thinking application is something that I use on the internet and I have a subscription for, and a software is something I download on my computer.
Oh, well, now oftentimes software is a service where you
Yeah.
pay that monthly subscription.
Right, okay.
They've changed their business model to that.
Okay.
So yeah, somewhat synonymous.
And I will say that probably the majority of our educational applications are also hosted in the cloud. The vendors we're using for our textbooks and all those that have student data related to it, those are also cloud providers for us, or services and application.
And now he opens a new can of worms, and that is textbooks. And can you talk about how textbooks, fits in here?
Sure. Yeah,
Just
that's-
at some point where it seems the right
No,
moment.
now's fine. And you're right, when you laugh at a can of worms, or could be a giant bird walk. The challenge with, what historically was the textbook, those of us who were teachers years and years ago had the set of textbooks in their classroom. That has evolved now, so it's digital and isn't purchased as that old model of a textbook, which changes how we operate. You might remember last spring when we were talking budget, some of the challenges of making that shift from paper-based textbook to digital, and what that has implications on for financially and for budgets and for resubscriptions, et cetera. We're very much in the throes for that, not just Granite, but everyone in that change for software as a service or digital text opportunities. This continues to be a challenge for us, and even to the point, melding that question with our earlier philosophical question around how much choice. We do have adoptions as a district for, iReady is our current math adoption in elementary, but there's also ancillary when whoever was a history teacher, they had the history textbook, but they also maybe had some ancillary texts that they'd gone to the principal and say, hey, I'd like to use this and this, here's how it aligns with the standards, I'd like to use these ancillaries. That also happens digitally as well. So we are challenged with grappling with ancillary digital textbooks, if you will. And how do we reconcile that, and where's the Goldilocks amount of allowing for classroom level choice that we can still support. When it was just, I want this set of books, it was a different game than when I need it delivered over the internet, which is today. Last bullet point on here, I want to mention educational technology is continuing with the elementary Canvas pilot. One of the recommendations to just reduce complexity, we have 2 LMSs in Granite, and what they were speaking to there is Canvas LMS that we use in secondary and Google Classroom that we use primarily in elementary. So Chris and his team have been piloting that for over a year now. I think we're in year 2 of that. And that has presented certain challenges for us to just say everyone will use Canvas is a piece that we're going to have to reconcile with, because we do have that user group who prefer Google Classroom. And so that being another example of the degree to which we allow for complexity while trying to juggle everything, if you will.
So I know there's some that use, that just do stuff on Google Classroom, but then just, okay, here's my Canvas page, and takes you to Google Classroom. Is that?
I think secondary, you're speaking secondary, sometimes they'll do that if they very much
Sometimes
prefer.
secondary, I can imagine this would happen probably a lot with elementary as well, since they have everything already on Google Classroom.
Right.
Are we just trying to move away completely from Google Classroom, or what? I mean.
No. What we had hoped was, and this is what Chris is experiencing in the pilot, is we had hoped, because we receive Canvas for free and we do want to try and minimize complexity for efficiency's sake. Our hope was through the pilot, by exposing some teachers and incentivizing them to use Canvas, we would have some groundswell movement of yes, this is a no-brainer, this is easy. And we're not running into that right now. So we're having to navigate that. We didn't get the easy home run. So now it's okay. We're talking through what's the plan.
Is Classroom, are we paying also for Classroom? Is that the reason why we're having an issue with the 2, or I mean, can they
it's
continue?
just being able to just 2 LMSs to have to provide support on, rather than 1. It's not a budgetary issue.
Sure, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I think it is good to get the elementary kids on Canvas as well, because secondary is using it, and it's having that consistency from teacher to teacher and from school to school is
As
great.
well as their parents.
So yeah, for the parents to do. To me, the Canvas, we've got to get parents on Canvas a lot better, because it's not as user friendly, and it's not as user friendly for a teacher, and it's not as user friendly for a parent to get on, speaking from somebody who can't log on to my kid's Canvas. So I understand that we're doing that, but somehow if we can also add that in, that we've got to make sure that we're we're pushing this to get parents on there, because it's
Sure.
easy to get on Google Classroom and do that. So anyway,
Yeah, when they speak to the challenge of professional learning and just finding that time and named professional learning not only for our district office group, professional learning for teachers, but there's a professional learning for parents element as well, noted.
And they use Canvas in the colleges and the Utah colleges.
Yeah. So that summarizes the current actions. Now, Plant Moran has given us a lengthy report, and Marv did a great job of they've given us a lot of items to consider, but it have been really great about, hey guys, don't freak out. It doesn't mean you're losers. This is just putting you up against what we see nationally. And again, I mean, I think he said it well. We paid them to name everything in the kitchen sink and tell us what we should be considering and looking at. So we do have that report as well and plan to break that down item by item and start looking through them, and in fact have done a lot of that already.
Rick, I'm sorry, I have one more question. Was teacher training on here anywhere?
Plant Moran named it as professional learning and certainly recognized that that's an element that we need to improve. Professional learning is always a challenge for us because of the time constraint and challenge there. So it becomes this larger, I did not put it under this technology steering committee, and I probably should have. It becomes this longer question of what are we going to prioritize when it comes to professional learning, because our time is finite.
so one of the, this is just something, because I noticed this and I brought it up, and it's not on, I don't think it's on any of the action plan, but when they said it too, I had that same question. Why are we using 2 email? We've got the kids on Google. We've got employees doing something else. Are we looking at that at all as well, consolidating that?
Yeah,
Is
so
that-
again, could be a bird walk here. I'll try and be articulate and concise. Well, for a lot of our business uses, so for example, from a teacher perspective even, we use Microsoft Outlook, which is email and calendaring. When Chromebooks hit a price point, for those of you who've been around, you'll remember we were using iPads as our solution in classrooms, and certainly didn't have a one-to-one at that point, especially at the price point that we had. What changed the game was the price point of the Chromebook, which allowed us to do carts in every classroom, and over time is even in many schools have one-to-one issuing of Chromebooks. That Chromebook comes with its own software, Google software, and so from a classroom standpoint, a lot of what teachers are doing because they have Chromebooks is using Google. Now, they don't really email kids or use calendars in Google. What they use primarily is shared documents and the Drive. So, as we've tried to wrestle with this, our plan moving forward is to continue to use Outlook for our email and for our calendaring. Even teachers don't use calendaring all that much. They use it somewhat for committee meetings and certain things. From a business standpoint, continuing with email and calendaring in Microsoft, and then still allowing or having that classroom shared Drive in Google and shared docs in Google. So this is an area that we haven't felt like, it comes back to that return on investment, that we should mandate one over the other. Well, we feel like we can find an agreeable solution to bridge both of those and still be able to function well.
Okay.
And certainly there'll be several who prefer one platform over another, and time usually solves this for you. We no longer use iPads. Time solved that dilemma for us.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I look forward to hearing the progress on this all. And thanks in advance for your work.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, On behalf of the board, thank you for, I mean, you obviously got this report and you've taken the bull by the horn, so to speak, and gotten on this. So we appreciate you moving forward on this because, as you know, this has been a huge concern to this board, and we really appreciate you doing that. So
Yes.
thank you. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for your,
Thanks to Chris and Dale as well.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
We'll hand it over to Bryce. We'll transition here for a couple minutes.
Yep. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back in 5 minutes.
HDMI. Thank you, sir. Fingers crossed we connect.
Yes,
All right, thank you. We are back. I did fail to mention that our new BA is here as well, Todd Hopper. We'd like to welcome him and are thrilled to have him here as part of our district. So we're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Bryce Day, who is in charge of the director of our special education department. Thank you, Bryce, for being here.
Thank you. We are back.
Looking forward to hearing I did fail to mention that our new BA is here as well, Todd Hopper. We'd like to welcome him and are thrilled to have him here as part of our district.
Just kind of a review of some of the terms we hear
we're
in
going to go
special
ahead
education
and turn
because
the
it's not
time
always
over to
intuitive
Dr. Bryce Day,
what
who
those
is in
terms
charge
mean.
of the director of our special
And
education
as we've
department.
talked about kind of the process,
We are back.
how we get to where we came from, and
I did fail to mention that our new BA is here as well, Todd Hopper. We'd like to welcome him and are thrilled to have him here as part of our district.
Just kind of a review of some of the terms we hear.
We're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Bryce Day, who is in charge of the director of our special education department. All right, thank you. We are back. I did fail to mention that our new BA is here as well, Todd Hopper. We'd like to welcome him and are thrilled to have him here as part of our district.
Just kind of a review of some of the terms we hear.
We're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Bryce Day, who is in charge of the director of our special education department. All right, thank you. We are back. I did fail to mention that our new BA is here as well, Todd Hopper. We'd like to welcome him and are thrilled to have him here as part of our district.
Just kind of a review of some of the terms we hear.
We're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Bryce Day, who is in charge of the director of our special education department. All right, thank you. We are back. I did fail to mention that our new BA is here as well, Todd Hopper. We'd like to welcome him and are thrilled to have him here as part of our district.
And it's not defining it's been like
We're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Bryce Day,
where they were saying, we can use that money.
all right, thank you. We are back.
The state did fail to mention that our new BA is here as well, Todd Hopper. We'd like to welcome him and are thrilled to have him here as part of our district. And it's not defining it's been like
We're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Bryce Day,
where they were saying, we can use that money.
all right, thank you. We are back.
The state did fail to mention that our new BA is here as well, Todd Hopper. We'd like to welcome him and are thrilled to have him here as part of our district. And it's not defining it's been like
We're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Bryce Day,
where they were saying, we can use that money.
all right, thank you. We are back. The state did fail to mention that our new BA is here as well, Todd Hopper. We'd like to welcome him and are thrilled to have him here as part of our district.
trying to find an agenda.
Go ahead and talk to
Where they were saying, we can use that money.
Thank you. We are
Where they were saying, we can use that
major life function. So if you think about 1/3 of the total population of the United States is in some way disabled, the idea of